Shields up, Ironbreakers, and welcome back to Monster Hunter Wilds. So over the last couple of days, we've received an absolute deluge of information in regards to our most anticipated game of 2025, and we've also had a special episode of the podcast which featured both of the English-speaking community managers for Monster Hunter. So if you guys still haven't had a chance to check out that podcast, I really recommend that you do, because, it's pretty cool of the Capcom team to actually take the time to speak with me for about an hour. We got a lot of new information during that, and you guys also get to experience what the community managers are like in a more unscripted setting. So thank you very much for checking that out. In case you guys are curious, the podcast is also available pretty much anywhere you can get your podcasts, at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, whatever. Just look up for Conscast and you'll be able to find it. But anyway, in today's video, I wanted to go over some of the information that we didn't discuss in the podcast, but this is also information that has been revealed in interviews, whether that is interviews in different languages, different outlets, content creators. There's just a mashup of information in my head right now. I don't even know where I got all this information. A lot of it definitely came from Arekkz Gaming. Shout out to the team over there. Those guys are awesome. Dear Gamer also made a video. He actually got to go to the presentation. I'm going to be putting links to both Arekkz Gaming as well as Dear Gamer. Obviously, Gaijin Hunter also did a 1 hour and 20-minute video that I'm going to be linking all of that in the description of this video in case you guys want to check out some more information. But without any further ado, let's get into the topic and discuss some of the things that I talked about with the community managers during the podcast and some of the things that have been revealed since then. So one of the first things that I wanted to address is an increase in story focus. So this is definitely something that I've seen repeated across many of the interviews that I've read over the last couple of days, and it was also pointed out by Jono during the podcast that apparently there's going to be an increased focus in the story of the game this time around. And it is my understanding that this is going to divide the community a little bit, because I'm well aware that a significant portion of the community doesn't really care what the story of the game is. And for those people, I just sincerely hope that Capcom allows them to skip the cutscenes, because fundamentally, you just don't want to force people to watch cutscenes that they don't want to watch. And I think it's actually good to just have that option. Now, for me personally, I'm going to be watching every little bit because I really appreciate the dedication of the Monster Hunter team to things like animations. I think they have literally the best animations in the business. The attention to detail that they provide to those things, whether that is in cutscenes or even just the idle animations of NPCs, I think they are top-notch when it comes to that. So that's one of the things I definitely want to see. Also, there's going to be voice acting for our Hunter, which is going to be pretty awesome. There's going to be voice acting for the Palico. I'll talk a little bit more about that further in the video, but all of these are things that really excite me, because here's the thing. When it comes to Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, which is, one of the games that came to the West, when I played that, it always left a special place in my heart, because I felt like that was the coolest story that we've gotten so far when it comes to Monster Hunter. And it's not even like a super in-depth story, it's more like an adventure where we go to multiple locales and multiple places and we get to visit multiple villages. And I thought that was absolutely phenomenal. I really enjoyed experiencing that, and I thought it was just a ton of fun. Now, to me, them focusing more on story is a really cool thing because I enjoy that aspect of the game. But that doesn't mean that that is what matters most to me. At the end of the day, the most important thing is still going to be the gameplay. But I think that having an increased emphasis on story is good to bring in new players so that they can check out the game as well, and we can have fresh hunters joining the community. Because this is something that Jono himself said during the podcast. Some players might not check out Monster Hunter because they might be more story-focused players, and then they never really get to experience what the gameplay of the game is like. And a lot of us know that it is not an easy thing to get into a Monster Hunter game. As a matter of fact, that might be a topic that I'll explore in a future video, because the first time that I went into the Monster Hunter, which was Monster Hunter Tri, I didn't like it. I didn't get into it, and, I completely dropped off of it, and it was only much later that I joined back in through Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, and this was because I was playing with a friend. And there is when I was able to actually get into the game. So there needs to be things that people enjoy that are maybe not related to the core loop of the gameplay that will hopefully entice people to stick with the game long enough that the game manages to plant its seed and kind of, get people engaged with it. Because I feel like one of the problems of acquiring new hunters into the game is that a lot of people don't understand what the game is all about, and they usually don't stick around long enough to do so. If you give them a lot more of these narrative beats and whatnot that maybe will keep them a little bit more engaged, I see this as a win. I mean, how are we going to be, how is there going to be a negative thing for us if there's a good story associated with our already amazing game? To me, this is a no-brainer. Again, I just hope that they give you the option that if you're the type of hunter that does not want to engage with it, let people skip. Having options is always a good thing, at least in my personal opinion. Just let people skip the cutscenes if they don't want to watch them. I think that's the most important thing. Now, one key word that has been used in a lot of these interviews has been seamless. Seamless exploration, seamless traversal, and what has been said in a lot of interviews is that apparently the way that the game is going to work is you can just seamlessly go from the village into the open, into the hunting locale. Now, this is actually something that I said was probably going to happen when we got the very first trailer. And even Gaijin was like, nah, I don't think that's going to be the case. At least I remember him saying that in a podcast. I could be mistaken, I don't know. But I remember a lot of people were telling me, no. You're gonna load in just like you did on all of the other. And I was like, but wouldn't it be cool if the village is a physical location that you can just go to, and then you can get out of the village and go hunting? I think that's really cool. And another thing that we see in one of the trailers, which was, I think it was the second trailer, we actually see that the Doshaguma attack one of the villages in that trailer. And I thought that was really cool because if the village is a physical location in the world, that means that from time to time, the village itself can get attacked and the monsters can come and hit you where you live. This is actually something that Wild Hearts did in one of its quests. There's a monster that straight up goes into the village of that game and starts wreaking havoc, and you fight in the village next to the places where you usually have shops and stuff like that, and you're fighting a monster in there. And I thought that was really cool. And that was something that I always wished could happen in Monster Hunter. And the fact that the village is a seamless place indicates that this could be something that they're planning. Maybe, you start off a hunt in one place, then the monster goes, raids the village, you go and you defend the village, and maybe if you don't defend the village, maybe there'll be a penalty to your food buffs, or, like a temporary penalty that you would get for failing to defend the village or something like that. I think that is a cool aspect that can be explored when you have a world that is as seamless as this one. Now, what a lot of the interviews also mentioned is that as you progress through the story, you're going to be unlocking new hunting locales, which is another thing that a lot of people that are new to Monster Hunter are getting confused because they look at all of the gameplay footage and they're like, so the game is just one big desert, like that's it? And obviously, Monster Hunter veterans are going to be aware of the fact, no, there's probably going to be like a jungle biome or a forest biome, or, then eventually maybe a snow biome, a lava biome. There's going to be different types of biomes that we're going to be having in the game. This is something that we've always had in every single Monster Hunter game, and none of that is going to change. It just seems that this time around, as you arrive in the Forbidden Lands, that eventually you're going to progress through that and you're going to unlock further biomes, and that a lot of those are actually going to be connected and you can seamlessly traverse through all of them. So this is kind of the dream scenario that a lot of people had during Monster Hunter Worlds, wherein they would be in the ancient forest and you could see the Wildspire Waste in the distance, but you couldn't really go to it. You would have to go through a loading screen of some kind, right? It seems like this time around, that's not going to be the case. You're going to be able to see the Wildspire Waste equivalent, and you're going to be able to just ride there using Seikhret, and you're going to be able to seamlessly traverse all of the hunting locales. Now, this gives us a lot of really interesting scenarios, which is one of the things that I really wished for, if you guys remember, where I said, what if you started hunting a monster in the ancient forest? But then the quest evolves and now you're hunting the monster in this other location. And I think that with a lot of locales being seamlessly connected, which by the way, it's not going to be all of the locales. I'll give you guys a couple more details from other interviews that we've seen. But just being able to connect certain locales, that means that you can go from fighting a monster in what is now called the Windward Plains, I believe, and you could go into, the lava biome or something like that, or a snow biome or a jungle biome, and you get a lot more diversity of background as you are hunting, and it makes the hunts much more interesting, which is something that I'm super excited for, right? But like I said, this is not going to be all locales that are going to be connected, because it is also mentioned in some of those interviews. I believe this was like some Korean interview or something. I picked this up from the Arekkz gaming video, so, you know. But it was basically mentioned that some zones are going to be further away and they're going to necessitate a different mode of transportation, and those are not going to be as seamless because it just wouldn't make that much sense. So there are still going to be zones that they may have a loading screen, or they may have some type of specific transportation that you have to go through, like maybe an airship or something like that, in order to navigate from one zone to another. But just be aware, that's going to be the way that it's going to go. So you start the game, you're going to be in Windsward Plains, you're going to be progressing through that, and then eventually you're going to unlock, I don't know, let's say the Frost Plains, and then eventually you're going to unlock the Lava Plains or the Jungle Forest or something along those lines, and all of that is going to be interconnected, minus some island off in the distance. Let's say some random Zora Magdaros exploded somewhere out at sea, and then you have to take a boat to actually get to that other hunting locale. But either way, this is super exciting, the fact that you're going to be able to do all of these things. And in my opinion, considering all of the Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate references that we've gotten, which, by the way, it has been confirmed, this game is not a continuation of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. This game is not a continuation of Monster Hunter World. This was confirmed through some other interviews. You know, because of that, my theory is, even though it's not a continuation, there's a lot of call-outs to it, and in a lot of interviews, people have mentioned villages. I think there's going to be more than one village, but I'm not 100% sure if that is going to be the case or not. But I think that would be really cool, and that would be very exciting, because as you guys know, that's one of my favorite aspects of 4 Ultimate. The fact that you get exposed to so many different cultures within the Monster Hunter game, it just feels really great. And you're this traveling group of people that are just, you know, roaming the world. As a matter of fact, I'm hoping that that is going to be what we're going to get, because you have the sand skiff, right? Just like that sand ship that shows up in the beginning of the first official trailer, because the very first trailer, they're calling it a teaser or whatever. But you see that, and that could be our mode of transportation between villages. As a matter of fact, if you take the example of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, maybe that ship gets modified over time. So it starts as a sand ship, then maybe it gets like a balloon, becomes an airship, and then we can go to different locations. You know, maybe you do a couple of hunts that are not necessarily to upgrade you, but to upgrade the ship itself. That would be awesome. Now again, none of this is confirmed. This is just me theorizing based on some of the information that we got, and it's just really exciting. This is shaping up to be potentially one of the best Monster Hunters that we've ever gotten. But, you know, that's just me being maybe a little bit overly excited about all of the information that has been coming out. Now, another piece of information that we've gotten is that there are going to be temporary camps. So camps are going to work a little bit different. Now, for those of you that are new to the franchise, you know, we usually have the concept of villages, but when we're in a hunting locale, there's also camps. These are locations that we will find, and we can set up camps there. This is a mechanic that was introduced with World and Rise. In previous games, usually they just set you up the camp at the beginning, and then there might be conditions or quests that you do to receive more resources when you first jump into the quest. But, you know, in World and Rise, you would have to find the location that is suitable to set up camp, and then you would set up a camp, and the camp would just be there forever. That is not going to be the case this time. So I've seen a little bit of conflicting information when it comes to this, whereas some people have been saying you can just set up camp anywhere. That is not the case. You're going to have to find specific locations to set up camp, and once you find those locations, you can set up a camp. That's going to cost some type of resources that you're going to be using in order to create the camp. According to Maximillian Dude, just a bunch, and that's another one that I forgot to shout out. Maximillian Dude also made an amazing video. I'll have links to his stuff in the description below as well. But like I said, when you set up the camp, a bunch of Palicos are actually going to come in, and they're going to start mounting up the camp for you, which I'm sure is going to be a really cool animation. But the thing about these camps, right, the idea this time around, because the maps are going to be much bigger, the idea here is you're going to choose an area of the map, and you're just going to go like, you know what, I feel like hunting in here for a little bit. And you're going to set up camp there, and you're going to be hunting in that area for a little bit. You're going to be grinding a couple of monsters. Maybe you're getting ready to do some armor or some weapon that requires specific materials of monsters that roam in that specific location. And you're just going to stay there, so you're going to set up a camp and you're going to go to town, kill a bunch of monsters. Now, the thing about these camps is that they can be destroyed by monsters. So eventually you might lose your camp. One of the things that Joe brought up during the podcast is that he was looking at it almost like a Dragon's Dogma camp, which if you get raided at night, it can be destroyed. It's not going to work exactly like that, obviously, because this is Monster Hunter. It's going to have different mechanics to it. But the idea is these camps might get destroyed. So it'll be interesting to see just how much management is going to be required for you to maintain your camps. But to me, this is a good thing because you guys know I'm weird. I like the preparation aspects of Monster Hunter, and I like to think that, oh no, one of the preparation aspects that you have to do is maintain your camp in a state that it is not going to be destroyed by a monster. Or every now and then you have to go out to your camps and make sure that everything is okay. Maybe you deploy like some type of thing that keeps the camp safe for X amount of hours or something like that. You know, just having some type of preparation aspect linked with that, I like it. But I already know there's going to be a portion of the community that's going to be like, no, I don't want chores in my video game. And I get it, but I hope that people can understand. Fundamentally, Monster Hunter, in its essence, is not a boss rush game. It is a hunting game, and there's going to be like some simulation aspects to it. And one of the things that I've noticed from the conversation that I've had with the community managers and the information that I've seen is that I believe they're almost bringing some light survival elements with these destructible camps and with the way that cooking is going to work, because you're going to be able to cook at these camps. But you're still able to do the traditional cooking. You can just, fast travel to the village and cook there and then come back and go hunt. You can basically, from my understanding, you can kind of play the game just like you've always played it. Go to the village, pick up a quest, go to a hunt, go back to the village, do whatever you want that way, right? But you don't have to. There's another option, which is you have these camps that you set down that are going to work like camps have worked in the past, and you're going to be able to cook in these camps, and you're going to be able to do things, and these camps are going to be destructible. They also work as checkpoints. So I'm assuming that if you cart, you are going to potentially be sent back to these temporary camps as well. Now, together with the seamlessness of the map, there's also a seamless aspect to questing. So basically, you can just run up to a monster, start attacking it, and that will generate a quest. And I kind of feel like some people are confused by this because they're thinking, well, we've had quests before, because you could go on an expedition and you could just hunt as many monsters as you want and then, just go away whenever you're done with that, right? But there's a difference between that and doing a quest, because you get additional rewards for doing specific quests and you get game progress from doing quests, whereas you don't necessarily get game progress from doing expeditions. Now, this was actually already implemented to an extent in Monster Hunter World. There were certain quests that would be dynamic, like one of the examples that I remember was you're doing some type of you're doing like an investigation, you're in an expedition. Some of you guys might not remember this, but there's one where it's like you're looking for a camp and you find the camp spot and there's a Kuliaku there, right? But you're in an expedition. And when that happens, you can instantly start the Kuliaku quest. And there's a couple of more quests like that already in Monster Hunter World. This was them probably experimenting it with a system like that. And that is going to be the way that it's going to work here. You're basically going to go out into the world and you can begin quests whenever you want. You can just choose, I'm going to attack this monster, start attacking it, and you get something that says, oh, do you want to mark this as a quest? And that is when you're going to get that message from Alma where she says, we are now starting this hunt in the name of the guild, because fundamentally you are going to be the expedition leader this time around. You're not just another hunter. So you can, take the leadership approach of being like, no, we need to take down this monster, he's got to go, and Alma can just go, okay, well then, in the name of the guild, we're now killing this monster. Whereas before, you couldn't really do that, which is a really cool thing if you think about it. You have more responsibility. There's a justification for the fact that you can just take on quests like this willy-nilly, and I appreciate that they put in that effort because it contributes more to immersion, personally. That's just me. There's also like some type of list that you have access to when you go out into the world. You can just click the monster on the minimap, which by the way, they've said it's been tremendously improved. There's actually like a 3D map that, Anybody that wasn't at those presentations, we haven't really seen that map, but everybody that was at the presentations are saying this is like the best thing since sliced bread. The map is way better, and you can click monsters in that map, and you can automatically see, okay, there's all these quests for this monster, and then you can select the quest, start the quest that way. And this caused a couple of publications to report there's not going to be a quest board anymore. I don't think that's the case. I don't see Capcom really going away from just having a quest board. I think the quest board will still be there, but it will probably see a lot less utilization. That's my interpretation of that anyway. Another interesting aspect of it is that you will no longer be automatically ported to a village after a quest. This goes in line with the seamless aspect of quests, right? Because you can take on quests anytime that you want. You're out in the world, you're doing your thing. You finish the quest, you don't necessarily go back to the village. You can just go on and do whatever the hell you want. There's no 60 seconds and you're back home. You're just like, okay, now I want to tackle another monster, and you keep going. This is somewhat reminiscent of the Guiding Lands, for those of you who remember, because that's kind of like how the Guiding Lands worked. You would be like, oh, there's this monster, we're going to hunt this monster, kill that, carve it. Then you're going to go hunt another monster, kill that, carve it. And to me, this is really, really cool, because that was one of the really cool things to do while you were out in the Guiding Lands. It's just like, oh, I'm just going to keep hunting monsters. As a matter of fact, this just seems the concept of Guiding Lands implemented at scale for a full game. Now, there's going to be good aspects and bad aspects to this, because a lot of people didn't really like the Guiding Lands. So I'm very curious about you guys that didn't really care for the Guiding Lands that much. Let me know how you feel about all of the information that you've seen so far in the comment section down below. But yeah, that's kind of like the vibe that we get. Now, another piece of information that was brought up is that this time around, the monsters have collision after they die. Now, for those of you who don't know, after a monster is completely dead, you basically clip through the monster, and you basically go inside the monster and you carve him, and it's whatever. It's a little bit immersion breaking, but nobody really cares at that point, because like, well, the hunt is done. There's no collision on the monster, just to be more convenient and carve it and whatnot. This time around, no, you just straight up, you walk on top of the monster. It's actually a physical object in the world, which makes me wonder if we can actually move the monster. Like, what if I wyvern fire a dead monster? Will it like limp a little bit? You know what I mean? Just like, there's like a little, it just moves slightly to the side. I know, I'm a sick person. I'm very sorry, but it is what it is. I think that'd be funny. But regardless of that, that's how you carve. I don't think that carving in different portions of the monster is going to affect anything. That was one of the things that Maximillian was saying. He wasn't saying that it affects anything. He was just like questioning, would it affect something? I don't think that's going to be the case. But anyway, that's something that's cool. Now, another thing that was mentioned in these interviews is you are going to see more than 3 monsters on any locale. So there can be more than 3 monsters. They're not giving us a specific number, but I think that's really cool because it just makes things more immersive. That also means that at some points, maybe there will be less monsters, even though they haven't really mentioned this. But traditionally, in most Monster Hunter hunts, you usually get like your 3 monsters in the map, and you hunt the monster that you're interested in, and the other 2 are just there for immersion's sake, even though sometimes you can use the monster interactions such as turf wars and stuff like that and take advantage of that during your hunt. Usually they're just there to be there, unless they happen to be the targets of the hunt, which can happen sometimes as well. But this time around, we're no longer limited to 3 monsters, so that's something. And on top of that, there's also going to be like 2 or 3 monster types per hunting locale that are going to be around in herds. So this is one of the things that I was wondering about, like, is every monster going to have a herd? Like, would we have a herd of Rathalos? How would that work, right? So there's going to be like 2 or 3 monsters in the game per locale that are going to be running around in herds. Obviously, the ones that we see in Windward Plains are going to be the Dushaguma or the Balahara. Those appear to be in herds because usually you see more than one Balahara doing those sandpit things that they usually do to trap other monsters and whatnot. And obviously the Dushagumas, you usually see them in a herd. Now, when it comes to herd monsters, it seems like there's going to be one very specific monster that is going to be the alpha, which means the other one are going to be more like side monsters. So I kind of look at this as a Great Izuchi situation, where you have a Great Izuchi and he has 3 other dudes that are just, was it 3 or was it 2? I forget, but he has like 2 other dudes that are just with him, and they kind of like follow up on some of his attacks. I feel like that was one of the first iterations that we got to see of what could be like a herd monster. In a way, you've already seen, like in Try and whatnot, you would see the Great Jaggy, would have the Jaggies with him, but they weren't really synced, right? They were just in that same location and whatnot. But in Rise is when we first saw the monsters actually syncing up with the big monster, and I thought it was really cool. This time around, we're going to have a bunch of them, and the thing is, they're not just small monsters, right? They're big monsters. And I'm actually curious, how's it going to work if I just decide, you know what, I'm going to kill the whole herd. I'm just going to walk in there with my gun lance, full burst everybody, because they're close enough to all get hit by the full burst, Wyvern Blast. I wonder if I can just kill them all, because that's just something that I would do because I'm crazy, right? But, you know, it's an interesting thing. So there's mechanics that you can use to separate the alpha from the herd. So for instance, one of the things that it was done in some of the presentations was that the person playing, who was the game director, Takuta-san, I believe, he was fighting the herd, and then he would lure them over to the Balahara, and the Balaharas would do their sandpit thing, and they would start sinking all of the Dushagumas into the trap, and then eventually the alpha would pop out because he's stronger than the other ones, and he would be able to escape the trap, but the other ones would be captured in the trap, and they would probably end up in a lower level or something, and that would separate him from the herd. But it also makes me question, is it possible that the alpha could potentially reunite with the herd, and you have to like rethink your strategy and try to get him away from the herd again? I know that a lot of people are going to be against that because a lot of people still play it like a boss rush game, which in my opinion is not. But personally, to me, that's fascinating. Like the way in which you fight, if you make too many mistakes, eventually the Dushaguma would get to go and reunite with his herd, and now he's more dangerous again. Maybe the herd could even lick his wounds a little bit, and that would like fix him up, and he would regain a little bit of HP. Kind of like the same way that other monsters go away and they sleep and they regain health. You know, that type of stuff might happen. Anyway, the absolute, you know, potential of what might happen in a single herd hunt is very exciting to me. So I'm super curious to see what might happen. Now, they've also mentioned that the big monster that shows up, the what we're calling Thor Magala, that he will actually only show up during something that's called the Sand Tide, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's like when you get the sandstorm going and then eventually lightning shows up. Then apparently that's when he shows up and he kind of invades, and there's almost turf war type stuff happening. But Dear Gamer actually described that turf wars, I think it was Dear Gamer, that turf wars are actually a lot more engaging, as in it's not just a scripted animation that plays out and then monsters take a certain amount of damage and then that's done. It seems like the monsters actually fight for a little bit and they do different things and whatnot, and I'll be curious to see how that plays out. But basically, turf wars are also back, and that's also going to be pretty cool. Now, when it comes to tracking, this is something that they didn't really dive too deep into, which is something very important, because if you think back to Rise, there was no tracking. It's like, no, we have the Kahoot. The Kahoot always tells you exactly where the monster is, which in my opinion is not the best way of doing things. I like it when there's some type of tracking involved, when there's something along those lines to keep things a little bit more immersive. Personally, that's the way that I like it. But, you know, so Scoutflies are there, but they haven't explained what the Scoutflies are doing. So they follow Scoutflies in some of those presentations, but they didn't really elaborate on how Scoutflies are going to work. We also see Scoutflies used for wounding, which we'll get into when we get into focus mode and all that other stuff, right? Now, another thing is, it's been mentioned on some interviews that apparently there's no quest timer, which that's kind of weird to me. I'm not a fan of that. I like the fact that there's a quest timer, because if there's no quest timer, then in some situations you just don't have that much incentive to, you know, really min-max yourself, which I'm not saying you have to min-max, but there should be some type of motivation behind you wanting to become better. But then again, I guess, you know, if you're if your penalty is having to spend 1 hour to kill a monster. I guess that maybe that's punishment enough. So at the end of the day, it's not like the quest timer has been a relevant mechanic with the exception of certain challenging hunts. Like, for instance, the 30 minutes for Fatalis, that was challenging for some people. In the demos, whenever they put big monsters behind 15-minute time limits, that's also annoying for people. So I guess it's actually been a friction point within a lot of people in the community that they don't really like the timer. So, to be honest, I don't think I've ever, in the recent Monster Hunters like World and Rise, I don't think I've ever been at a point, besides Fatalis maybe, where I was like, oh man, I better get a move on. The timer's about to end. Now, on older games like Generation Ultimate, oh yeah, G rank, oh, I've timed out quests because I play the Gunlance, and I guess that's just what I deserve. But, you know, it is what it is. Now, another thing that was mentioned that I thought was very interesting is apparently there are sneak attacks. So, what was told to me by Joe, the community manager, is that this is not something that you're going to be spamming, so it's not like, oh, I'm going to hit the monster, then I'm going to run away, then I'm going to come back, I'm going to do another sneak attack. He mentioned you're not going to be able to do this. It's just meant to be something that you start your hunt with. But, you know, knowing the Monster Hunter community, they're going to figure out a way to just sneak attack a monster to death. I know you guys are going to figure it out. You always do. It is what it is. But that is not the intention. So the intention is just like, hey, if you're a careful hunter and whatnot, you can sneak up on a monster, get a sneak attack, which is going to deal a significant chunk of damage. It's probably going to be something similar to a wake-up attack. And, you know, you just get to do those before the monsters are aware. In a way, it reminded me a little bit of the Assassin's Creed Mantle, if you guys remember, which is like if a monster hasn't noticed you, you deal more damage. And people would, like, use that in ways to get a little bit of advantage in hunts and whatnot. But yeah, there are going to be sneak attacks. Apparently the button prompt is circle, or that will be B in your Xbox controllers. So just approach the monster, press circle, boom, you get a sneak attack. I'll be very curious to see how those pan out. I'm super curious. I want to see what my sneak attack on my Gunlance is going to be. Like, I'm moving slower to the monster with my big one-handed cannon. Just come up to him, just like, boom, sneak attack. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. But like I also mentioned, Assassin's Creed Mantles. Mantles are back. Most of I think the only mantle that is actually referenced in most of the interviews that I've read was the Ghillie Mantle. They used the Ghillie Mantle to get that sneak attack at the beginning of the presentation hunt. So, but yeah, Mantles are back. This is kind of like a double-edged sword when it comes to Mantles, because Mantles ruined the drip of a lot of people. People would work hours to get their perfect layered armor, and then you just like, okay, now I'm going to put the Airborne Mantle on top to get a bunch of deco power and stuff like that. Or now I put the Rocksteady Mantle or the Temporal Mantle, and now your drip is ruined. So if we do get Mantles, I'm hoping that they're more, let's call it subtle, so that they don't completely ruin your drip, so to speak. But we'll see how that all pans out. But it'll be interesting to see. Another aspect of the hunt was mounting, because we haven't really seen mounting in any of the videos, and it seems like mounting works in a similar way to Monster Hunter World. However, it is worth pointing out that a lot of people that saw the presentation said that Tokuda-san was able to get a mount on his first jumping attack off of Seikhret. And a lot of people were like, we kind of feel like you just gotta do one aerial attack and get a mount, but I don't think that's gonna be the case. I think it's just that they're probably still playing around with the mounting values, and for the purpose of the demo, they wanted, Tokuda-san to be able to just get that first mount super quick so that they can show off the mounting mechanic and make sense. Or maybe that's just the value that's going to be in the game for, like, your first mounting threshold is going to be very low. And that's kind of like what I would predict. I don't expect you to just like, hey, I feel like mounting, boom, mounted. Hey, I feel like mounting again, boom, mounted. No, I think there's going to be diminishing returns to that like we've always had. Maybe even kind of like Wyvern riding, which is after you mount it, you get a 10-minute cooldown or something along those lines. I definitely don't believe that you are going to be mounting all the time if that's something that you want to do. But it seems like a lot of people were convinced that it was going to be easier. So you can do jumping attacks off of Seikhret, and those do provide you with mounting damage, which can lead to a mounted attack. And speaking of Seikhret, a lot of people have been questioning, okay, so how does mounted combat work? Do we just get mounted combat and we get full access to the movesets of all of our weapons? Like people were asking, can I play hunting horn tunes, which I didn't even think of, but can I play hunting horn tunes while I'm on my mount? And the answer is no. You're not going to be able to do those types of specialty actions. It's just supposed to be very basic attacks so that you can hit things while you're moving around. The idea is that Seikhret is going to be much more for transportation and, you know, certain key moments of the fight where you might need to use the mount, but you're not meant to, you know, play the whole hunt on the back of Seikhret. They want you to get off of Seikhret. It is intended for you to fight just like you've always fought in Monster Hunter. I believe they also mentioned that bowguns do not get access to every single type of ammunition when they're on the back of Seikhret. So, you know, another thing that the Arekkz team mentioned that they saw in an interview was that Seikhret does have customization. You're able to customize like the color of his fur. So I'm assuming you're probably going to be able to customize his saddle and all of this stuff. But again, this is very much assumptions from me. I'm not 100% sure if that is going to be the case or not. Now, beyond that, when it comes to weapons, I specifically asked, is there going to be a new weapon? The team basically reinforced, we're working on, you know, differentiating the weapons, the existing weapons, making them really good, blah, blah, blah. All of the language that I've seen so far, if I had to guess, I would say no new weapon. Because here's the thing. When it comes to something as big of a feature as a new weapon, you're talking, this is something you reveal in the first 2 trailers. We've had 3 trailers, no new weapon. I don't believe we're getting a new weapon. I could be wrong, and I will be happy if I'm wrong. Like, feel free to point to this video and go like, Rurikhan, you were wrong. There is a new weapon. Haha, got him. And I'll be right alongside with you. Cool, man. Let's go. New weapon. But if I had to make a prediction, I don't think we're getting a new weapon. I think that a new weapon is such a massive thing that would be a key functionality of the game. I think that the key functionality of Monster Hunter Wilds, very much like you look at World, and the key thing there was no more loading zones. No more separate hunting zones. It's just one hunting locale. That was like one of the key features of World. Probably the biggest feature of World, right? You look at Rise, and it was like the key feature there was, okay, what does World look like in a portable environment, right? That's the way that I look at it. So when you look at Monster Hunter Wilds, I think that the key feature is seamless transition between locales. You know, you have your mount and you're going to be seamlessly transitioning through everything, and that's the key feature. A new weapon to me is a massive feature, and it is something that you would want to announce in the first trailers. But again, if they announce one later, I'm not going to be mad. I'm going to be real happy. But yeah, probably no new weapon. We also got a lot of reports about Longsword because, you know, obviously they showed off Longsword because it's their baby and blah, blah, blah. If you want to know more about that, I'd recommend check out Dear Gamer's video because he overanalyzed everything and he's actually a Longsword player, whereas I don't really play the Longsword that much. So, you know, I wouldn't be able to tell you, oh yeah, there's this new move and there's this other move. Not to mention I didn't even see it. But even just hearing people talk about it, I'm like, oh, okay, sure, Longsword things, spinny. But, you know, check out Dear Gamer for more Longsword stuff. So they talked about that, and they've also mentioned that the weapons that receive the most changes are the ranged weapons and Hunting Horn. Now, specifically the Hunting Horn, they said they went closer to the way that Hunting Horn worked in World, but they're also adding a couple of new things. My prediction for Hunting Horn is you're going to see a mix of what we've gotten in Sunbreak, but more leaning towards the World side. So a little bit less button mashy, so to speak. A little bit more thoughtful in regards to you playing your tunes and doing all of that stuff. But at the same time, I would expect it to be simpler than it was in World. That would be my prediction, but I don't really play the Hunting Horn that much, but that would be what I would expect. When it comes to ranged weapons, I don't really play ranged weapons, but I'm going to tell you what you guys deserve. What you guys deserve is a big old hit on a Nerf bat. Get nerfed into the dirt, my boy. It is what it is. I'm sorry, dude. Like, listen, let's just be brutally honest here, okay? Let's not play around and say that, oh, the weapons are balanced. I mean, ranged weapon mains know the weapons aren't balanced. I mean, right? You guys know that heavy bowgun and light bowgun and bow are generally way more powerful by a factor that isn't even remotely comparable to any of the melee weapons, right? Generally speaking, especially when it comes to bowguns. Let's just be brutally honest about that. And this is not something that upsets me, by the way. I genuinely don't care, because the way I look at it is like, if you beat a monster with a bowgun, that's one thing. If you beat a monster with a melee weapon, that's a completely different thing. So I just don't put these weapons in the same category, right? That's the way that I look at it. I know that this is going to upset some people, but it is what it is. Now, if the monster on a team wants to balance things, the only way to balance is, there's no way around it. The heavy bowguns and bowguns in general need to be nerfed. I'm not saying that I want this to happen. I'm saying the team said they're doing a lot of changes, and if I had to predict what is going to happen, if they want to bring those weapons more in line with other weapons, there's either going to be nerfs, or it's going to be more limited in the type of ammunition that you can use, which again just translates to what? A nerf? See, when I'm talking about nerfs, I'm not just talking about, nerf their damage. I'm talking about they might do other things to bring these weapons in line. They might also do things that make the weapon more fun to play. Keep that in mind. Because, for instance, you look at Rise and Sunbreak, the gun lance there was phenomenal to play. It might have been one of the most fun gun lance moves that we've ever gotten. But it was still weak as hell. So, but it was really fun to play. So there's that to it. But, whatever. It is what it is. I'm sure that you guys will be able to adapt, because ranged weapon mains, you guys are always like doing the best times and whatnot. And you're some of the best hunters. So I'm not overly concerned about that stuff, right? Now, let's talk about a very important thing. Focus mode, power clashing, as well as wounding. Now, I already told you guys what my theory was, and from everything that I've read in interviews and from talking with the community managers, I still think that my interpretation of it is the most correct one. I've seen conflicting information. Even Gaijin was saying the other day that, you don't need focus mode to pop wounds. You guys might be able, what? Focus mode? Wounds? What's going on? So, here's the thing. I didn't really get a straight answer when it comes to wounding. My theory was we're going to hit the same part of the monster multiple times. Eventually it becomes wounded, and then we can capitalize on that with focus mode. This was not confirmed. There's a lot of people that are saying that you need focus mode in order to wound monsters. I don't think that's the case. I think you just need to hit the parts, and if you hit the parts enough times, the parts become wounded. Again, my theory, and I haven't seen, very specific information that negates what my theory is, so I'm going to stick with it. Just keep in mind it is a theory, and there's conflicting reports out there of how wounding works. My prediction is you just do the hunting as normal, and if you focus too much on one part, eventually that part becomes wounded, and probably Part Breaker might help with that. At least that would be what I would expect, but I could be wrong. And then when it comes to focus mode, I think that you are going to need focus mode if you want to bust the wound with the special attack that we see in the first trailer, which is the one where he's just walking alongside the monster with a sword, slashing the monster, right? I think that those attacks are going to require focus mode. Gaijin is of the opinion, according to some of the interviews that he saw, that that is not the case, but, we will see what it's going to be like in the final version of the game. But if you guys want to know what my thought process on it is you just attack the monster. Eventually, once you get the wound, you go into focus mode, you capitalize on the wound. The other things that you can do in focus mode is you go into focus mode in order to parry certain monster moves. And depending on what the move is, you are going to get different animations. So for instance, if you parry that move that the Doshaguma is doing, where it seems like he's just, about to swipe the hunter, and he parries it, and the Doshaguma gets sent backwards, and then he kind of charges at the Doshaguma with a counter with a greatsword. If you're doing that, that's one of the counters. The other option is you do a counter, but the monster's coming in to bite you. Then you get that power clash that we see at the end of the first trailer with him holding his mouth open with the greatsword. So whether you get a parry with a counter or you get a power clash is going to depend on what monster you are fighting and what move that monster is doing. Focus mode, from my interpretation, is going to be all about knowing when you can use it. There's no limits on focus mode, so you don't use up stamina. You're going to use up stamina when you perform the actions, I would imagine, but it's not like it costs you stamina to enter focus mode. There's no cooldown associated with it. You can just enter focus mode willy-nilly. Another thing that focus mode is going to do is there's an aiming reticule aspect to it, which I assumed, and it was pretty much confirmed by the community team, that's going to work like aiming a bowgun. So when you go into focus mode, you can aim to specific monster parts, and it is not going to be a hard lock-on. I don't think that's going to be the case, but it is probably going to ensure that your next attack is going to hit that specific part of the monster, which is a good thing. I see a lot of people saying, oh man, no, it's all about, I don't want to deal with that. It's like, but to me, what I remember is trying to hit that goddamn horn on Alatreon with Gunlance. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare trying to hit his horns. So if they make it easier for me to be able to hit the specific part that I want to hit, I don't see this as a bad thing. I don't know why people are so upset over this. Like, a lot of people seem to think that focus mode is going to be easy mode. It is not going to be easy mode. You're going to be able to aim and be more accurate at aiming, which is something, by the way, that bowgun users can already do. Bowgun users can aim wherever the hell they want. They pop up their friggin' heavy bowgun and it's like, oh, I think I'm going to shoot at the legs now. Oh, I think I'm going to shoot at the tail. Oh, I'm going to get some slicing ammo, chop off that tail. Oh, I think I'm going to put some stickies in his head, bust up his face. Yeah, must be nice. Guess what? Melee users don't get to do that. And depending on the weapon that you're doing, a lot of times, the weapon that you're using, a lot of times hitting certain monster parts is an absolute nightmare. And I don't see why people see this improvement in quality of life as a bad thing. It's like Capcom says, we realize that certain melee weapons might be hard to hit certain parts of the monster. We're going to improve on that with a new quality of life feature. And people are like, no, I don't want that. I want to keep hitting the legs when I meant to hit the head. Like, what? No, well, too bad. Don't use it then. You don't have to use it. You don't have to use focus mode. It's optional. Guess what? You can just keep attacking at the monster like you've always have. You don't have to touch it. But me personally, I want to be able to say, no, I want to hit him in the head now. I want to mess up his head, and then I want to mess up his legs. Not to mention, it's going to make farming for parts that much better. Because like, hey, I need to get these horn breaks, but then you're trying to hit the head and he keeps like moving his head and whirling around. Like a prime example of this is goddamn Kushaladora. Whenever he falls down and he starts doing his little neck twitches and he just like pushes you away and suddenly you're hitting either the legs or the wings. I hate that. It's like, no, you're in the ground, stand still so that I can hit your goddamn head. And focus mode is going to make that better. So don't see focus mode as an easy mode. It is a quality of life feature that is going to enable you to hit the part of the monster that you want more reliably. I don't understand why this is such a bad thing, but to each their own. We'll see how it pans out. If the monsters become too easy, then I will talk about it and I'll be like, okay, so with focus mode, I'm able to just like, let's say, perma-stagger a monster. Maybe that's something they need to look into. But until then, I want to keep an optimistic thing because I want to hit monsters in specific parts. And it's not always the easiest thing to do. So, I think this is a good thing. So we talked about focus mode, power clash, the parrying aspect of it. Like I said, I do think you will need focus mode to bust wounds. So once you get a wound, you can go into focus mode to do special attacks. I don't think that you'll be able to do the special attack without focus mode. Gaijin thinks that this might be the case based on some interviews that he's seen. We shall see if that is the case or not, but I still have my theory that that's the way that it's going to work. Now, another thing is you're going to be able to throw bombs, which is something that you can already do in Monster Hunter Rise. You jump up in the air and throw a bomb down, stuff explodes. You're going to be able to do that in Monster Hunter Wilds. You're going to be able to roll and throw them. I'm not exactly sure how this is going to pan out because I haven't really seen footage of it, but people have said you can just pick up the bomb and throw it, or you can pick up the bomb and roll it against other bombs. So your wake-ups might work like that. Personally, I still want to set up a bunch of bombs in there and then Wyvern Fire. I much prefer that. I just think that Wyvern Fire is brutally satisfying for a wake-up, even though it's not the most optimal attack. Obviously, the best optimal attack is always going to be a Great Sword, True Charge Slash, assuming that True Charge Slash is still there. So, it is what it is, but you will be able to throw bombs. Another thing in regards to Seikhret that I forgot to mention, because, you know, there's the whole dodging thing. There is an auto dodge. This was confirmed by the community managers in my stream. So, but the auto dodge is going to function like, let's say you're in Tail Raider mode, which is what I'm going to call it, which is whenever you go onto the map and you're like, take me here, and Seikhret takes you there. During that, he's going to auto dodge things. But I think that if you're in manual control of Seikhret, which you can do, by the way, you do have full manual control of him, very much like a Palamute. I think if you're in that mode, you'll have to manually dodge. That would be my prediction, but this hasn't been made perfectly clear. But it is what makes the most sense, because it will be really weird if you're manually controlling Seikhret and all of a sudden he auto dodges. I don't think that would make a whole lot of sense. I think that the auto dodging is if you're in auto travel mode, you'll automatically dodge dangers, which makes sense. And I think that the auto dodging is not going to be able to dodge everything. So it's like if you're running past a Lunastra and she's just like, you know what? Nova, for no reason. I don't think you're going to be able to dodge that. But I could be wrong. That's just my prediction. But I was happy to hear from the community managers that you will be able to manually control them. Now, when it comes to the 2 weapon stuff, there's a lot of questions. People are like, so do we equip 2 armor sets? Do we only have 1 armor set? What's the deal? Can we equip 2 of the same weapon? And the answer is you can equip 2 of the same weapon. You can equip 2 different weapons if you want. You can equip 2 melee weapons if you want. You can equip 2 ranged weapons or a melee and a ranged weapon. You can do any combination of weapons that you want, but you get to have 2 of them, and you will be able to swap them whenever you are on Seikhret. Now, when it comes to the skills, they've been very hesitant to reveal too much information, but a lot of this is actually making sense to me, which is they're saying they're working on the skill system so that it makes sense for you to have 2 weapons. There's a lot of interpretations that you can have to that, so a lot of people are saying, so maybe the weapon skills go on the weapon and then more generic skills go on the armor. That is one potential outcome. The other potential outcome, and it is the one that I'm leaning more towards, is I think different weapon classes, not even classes, but like just different weapons are going to get different effects from decorations, which is already a thing. Certain decorations do different things for different weapons. Certain armor skills do different things for different weapons. I can't think of an example off the top of my mind, but you guys know that this happens in the game, right? I just think there's going to be a lot more that do that. So, for instance, actually I can think of one, Magazine, right? Magazine gives you additional shells in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak on the gunlance. But on the Charge Blade, it makes it so that you get to red faster, if I remember correctly. Right? Yeah, it makes it so that whenever you hit the monster, you can get to red files faster. You don't actually get an extra file. Whereas in World, you would get an extra file, right? But same skill, different weapons, different things. I think that there's going to be a lot more skills that are going to work like this, and they're going to be valuable for multiple weapons. I think that is the easiest thing for them to implement, and that is the thing that makes the most sense. So you'll basically have a skill that, for instance, Focus is going to do 4 or 5 different things for 4 or 5 different weapons. And therefore, if you have Focus on your armor, you're going to be able to use 4 or 5 different combinations of 2 weapons, right? Well, several combinations of 4 or 5 weapons. That's what I meant to say. But you guys get the idea. I think that is going to be the route that they're going to take. And this is probably one of the reasons why they haven't really talked too much about skills in the presentation. This is probably one of the reasons why they showed more, I don't want to say simple weapons, but weapons that kind of like share skills, because which weapons were actually shown? The hunting horn, the hammer, the longsword. Actually, the hammer was shown on the NPCs. I don't think it was shown on the actual hunter, but they showed the longsword, the great sword, dual blades, and the hunting horn. The hunting horn is the one that stands out the most. Actually, I don't know if they showed hunting horn. No, they just said that there's been the most changes on hunting horn. I think the weapons they've actually shown is great sword, longsword, dual blades. And for those, you know, all of those weapons share a certain amount of skills, right? So it makes it easy. Whereas if you were to show great sword and gun lance, you would need a different set of skills to operate those 2 weapons. So maybe they're still working on the skill system and how it's going to work. But anyway, that's the way that I think it is going to work. Now, another very important feature you're going to have NPC companions. We don't know too much about this. We just know that during the presentation, Tokuda-san shoots up a flare, and 3 companions come down and join the hunt, and these are NPCs, and they're going to be able to help you out with the hunt. Now, the thing about this is, and again, this is not something that I was able to get answers for, but the most important thing when it comes to the follower situation for me is going to be scaling. How is the scaling going to work for these followers? Are we going, if we summon followers, does the monster health increase? I think that should definitely be a thing. I don't think that a follower is the same as a player, so I don't think that you summon one follower and then suddenly the monster has twice the HP, which is not the case, but there's like a certain scaling for 2 players, right? What I think they should do is to assign to each of the followers the value of like half a player. So if you summon 3 followers, you would get a monster that is scaled for like, let's say 2 players. 2.5 players. You'd get a monster that's scaled for 2.5 players. I think that would be fair. I think that would make sense. What I don't think would make sense is for you to summon 3 NPC followers and the monster still has the same health, because it's going to be way easier. These followers are also able to do a lot of things. I've heard that they're able to lure the monster to traps. They're able to help you set up traps. They're able to help you set up camps even. I didn't quite understand this one. It was kind of weird. But, that's going to be a thing. Finally, in regards to the Palico voice, which a lot of people are extremely concerned about. Me personally, I'm going to have that voice on the whole time. Doesn't bother me at all. As a matter of fact, I like when characters speak. The reasoning behind the Palico being voiced, this was mentioned during my podcast, is because Palico, they're going to be able to tell you things that you might miss because there's going to be a lot of things happening out in the world, and it is going to be very important for newcomers to the series, because it's very easy for us that have played this game for so long to jump into a hunting situation and kind of like instantly start reading out all the little things that we already know from experiencing the previous entries of the game. So we know, ooh, the monster is wounded, we know what this means. Ooh, the monster is limping, we know what this means. Ooh, the monster is drooling, we know what this means. Newer players have no idea of any of this. Having the Palico being able to tell them, hey, by the way, the monster is drooling means he's hungry, he's going to look for food. Hey, the monster is tired, stuff like that. Being able to tell newer players how this works, I think is going to be important. And it's a good thing, because we want new players to join the franchise. I know there's a lot of people like, no, I want my old Monster Hunter and I don't want new players. And it's like, okay, but that's not going to bring us better games. Okay? I feel like World, to me, is the best Monster Hunter that I've ever played. Base World, not even Iceborne. Iceborne is great, but my favorite Monster Hunter is Base World. That was the best one for me. Loved it, adored it. Also loved Rise, also loved Sunbreak, but I want more games in the Monster Hunter franchise, and the way to do that is to get more players, because then they can have more budget to do even crazier things, like the Fatalis fight in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. So, new players are important. But basically, in regards to the Palico voice stuff, if you are a veteran, if you do not like that stuff, you can turn it off and just have him meow. Now, I don't know how that's going to work out in cutscenes, but in gameplay, they will just meow, like they've always done, and you just get text for whatever they're trying to tell you. So, if this was a problem for you, problem solved. Now, just one last thing that I would like to mention. This video is already way longer than I predicted. I thought this was going to be like a 20-minute video. My apologies, but Maximillian Dude praised the music of the game, which I thought was really cool, because I've been really enjoying the music. I've been seeing conflicting reports there, but like the more the synth sounds that we got during the trailer music, I absolutely adore, and I think it sounds fantastic. And I've been screaming it to the high heavens. And Maximillian Dude says that there's like pursuit music, and music when you're just roaming around, and music when you're in the fight. So like the music actually changes dynamically depending on the situation, and it's not just neutral music, combat music. It is neutral, combat. There's probably going to be something for enraged. We already had something different for mounting, which was pretty cool. He said there's one specifically for when you're pursuing the monster, so that has me really excited about the music as well. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video. My brain is a blender right now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, hit the like button, subscribe bell, notification icon, all that jazz, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.